Hey, what's going on? Keep the changers. We are live. Well, we're live. Maybe when you're listening to this, you're not live. We certainly hope you are. But we are live talking to a friend of mine. Now, I got to tell you, so many times I've done these podcasts and I've met new friends that have become instant friends, but this is a little bit different. This gentleman that I'm going to introduce to you today, as I even tell you this, I get cheers and I get emotional. He's been one of my closest friends for a number of years. He's been a giver, he's been a mentor, he's been a rock, he's been a sage, he's been a voice of reason. He's an incredible human being. And he's not necessarily somebody that everybody listening to this podcast said, oh, I know this guy, but you'll certainly want to know him and you'll want to jump on his cause. I really believe it when you get to hear his story. His is one of servitude and selflessness. And I am more than honored to bring up and bring to you my great friend who's called Coach by some, Sparky by others, the General by others. And to me, I just call him an incredible friend, Frank Marr. Hey, Frank, welcome, buddy.
Hi, Bart. Thanks. And it's Scrappy.
What did I say?
Sparky.
Well, it's so funny. I don't call you that. So
I know.
I'm glad you didn't say Bart. It's not Frank. It's Fred. Oh man, then I would have been
Yeah.
checking my driver's license to see how old I really was.
Yes.
Hey, it's good to have you here, buddy. As you know, we're having a cup of coffee with my buddy Scrappy today, and we're talking about a transformation, but we're also talking about who Frank is as a man. And I've known him for, oh my gosh, what's it been? It's got to be
93.
I can't even count back that far. But I want to have you come in and tell us your story, who you are, where you've been, your story as a family man, your story as a father, your story as a husband, your story as a trainer and a teacher and a veteran. Just tell us about Frank Marr, please.
Thanks, Bart. First of all, it's nice at my age to be referred to as live. So that's a good start. So we can move forward from there. I don't know. I think we start with my own mentor was my father, and he was a great man with a 7th grade education. Never missed a day of work until he got cancer, and then he didn't work anymore. Has the kind of determined the Irish in him. And this is maybe where I earned my nickname, is when I got home from Vietnam, he was 60, and they brought me home early because he had cancer, and they had given him 2.5 months to live. And he told me when no one else was in the room, he said, I'm not going anywhere. He said, you got that new son. I got a new grandson. I want to spend some time with him. And he lived to be 88. So he lived by the mantra, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, and today's a gift. That's why we call it the present. And I used to use that in my training. That would be on the opening sheet or whiteboard, whatever we were using. And I would start each meeting with that. And oddly enough, in the late 90s at a Cadillac dealership in Kentucky, we went from 9 to about 5 o'clock, and the general manager came to me afterwards, and he had tears in his eyes, and he handed me a book. And the name of the book was The Precious Present. And it was old, and it was dog-eared, and it was underlined, and it was highlighted. And he was in recovery for 12 years. And he told me his sponsor had given him the book. And in the last 2 days, he had been standing at the abyss. My message that day touched him, and he wanted to return the compliment by giving me the book. And way back in the mid-90s, that was my first introduction to someone from AA, and quite an introduction it was. I look at those things today as I attend these meetings on Tuesday nights, the toolbox meetings, and I hear the things that are spoken, and I can just think back to 1997 in Lexington, Kentucky, listening to this guy talk to me from 5 o'clock until almost midnight. And you know me, Bart, I don't stay up past 7 o'clock. So, I was intrigued with what he had to say.
Mm.
The message was embedded in me then. And as a very, very good friend of mine told me, it'll be 6 years in March since Jake's passed. At that time, you told me, you're ready for this. God has put you where he put you because he knew this was coming for you.
Yeah. So let's back up a minute because it's just so rich and so deep and so needed to be heard. But I want to set the stage a little bit because knowing who you are now, as you gave us a little bit of information about that, is massively important. But I think it's also important to know from where you came. So you talked about that time with your boss, and I'm going to try and see if that book is still around because I don't think that's
It
one
is.
is it? Okay. The
Spencer
Precious.
Johnson.
Okay.
Spencer Johnson.
I'm all over that. And I've heard of Spencer. He wrote the 1 Minute Salesperson. I think he was part of that book, maybe if my memory is right. But let's go back to you. So you were in Vietnam, correct?
Yeah.
And you're a veteran, and you poured your life into that. You got out. You also became a coach. So tell us a little bit about, and all of this leads to where we are now, right?
Yeah.
God does not waste us.
No,
right?
he puts
We
us
go,
in places where we're needed.
yeah, there's so many times when I thought, Frank, why am I doing this? This isn't where I'm supposed to be, but it's where he needed me to be. And so let's go back and talk about that journey from getting out of Vietnam, coming home early, that might have saved your life, and being there for your pops, and also what happened after that. We know, if you don't know already, Frank is accomplished in the automobile business. He's one of the best trainers I've ever seen, and I want you to tell a little bit of your Marrisms as we go through this, but take us back.
Okay, so I come home from Vietnam, and I have a 6-month-old son, and I saw him for the first time. I'm home 4 days, and I've enrolled back at Akron U full time. I have a full time job working for the city, driving a truck. By the way, young Frank Marr, scrappy, flunked out of Akron U after 18 months and got drafted, but never left the dean's list for 3 years. The more mature Frank Marr showed up and working 40 hours a week, taking a full load in school, and going to summer school because I wanted to finish and teach. I did in 3 years, and our fastest 3 years of my life, I was either working, studying, or in class. And when I graduated, oddly enough, I went from making $13,000 a year driving a truck to making $7,500 teaching school and coaching. Oh, $500 for coaching football, which took away the summer. So, and I let me just say before I go any further, there's not one thing I would change. I think we've formed an almost 77-year-old man based on all the things that happened to him, and I don't think we should look back and want to change much. Yeah, what's Sinatra say? Regrets. I have a few, but way too few to mention. So I spent a lifetime concentrating on positives. Uh, uh, Maybe I should have been a political advisor because I could spin myself as much as I could, as good as anything I could do. Uh, uh,
So let me ask you the question. Okay.
yeah,
So your heart going to school, you knew you wanted to be a teacher.
yeah.
Why? Why?
Well, I had done a little bit of coaching as soon as I graduated from high school with my old high school coach. He let me help out with the
What
freshmen.
position were you in high school?
I was an end. I was a
Mm,
receiver.
right
Um,
on.
uh, and one of the guys that I had as a freshman was a kid named Gary Pinkel, who wound up being the head coach at Missouri, very successful head coach at Missouri. Um, and in watching those kids grow, uh, I thought, man, this is what this is. I want this to be part of my life. And
Mm,
um, I loved being called Coach Marr. And so I go and I, I taught for 4 years and coached for 4 years. And during that time, I worked 2 jobs the entire time. So, and my youngest son, Dan, was born 5 days after I graduated from Akron U
mm,
in June of June 15th in 1973. And man, those kids were growing up right out from under me. I never saw them. You know, I was going to school. I was uh, working. I was at the library till 11 o'clock at night, and then I take this dream job, teaching and coaching. I can't support my family.
mm.
I got to work. I got to work 20 hours a week in a little grocery store that the guy was paying me $10 an hour under the table. And I was making more than I was making teaching, which was a
Oh,
shame.
yeah.
But that's the way things were. And um, opportunity came around, and the kid that was a quarterback on our team, his dad owned a Pontiac dealership, and he said, "Come to work for me this summer." And I said, "No, I don't want to wash cars. I'm washing houses with a couple of the coaches, and we're cleaning siding and painting." And he said, "How much are they paying you?" And I said, and I lied and said $200 a week. Uh, and he said, "I'll guarantee you 250
Hmm.
and a car." Well, the hook was the car, right? It is
Yes.
was for a lot of us back then.
Oh, yes.
So I went to work, and and uh, took me about 20 minutes to fall in love with the business.
Mm.
I mean,
Were you selling or
yeah,
washing cars? You
no,
were
I was
selling.
selling, man, and I thought to myself, this man, this is these guys are making this really hard. You know all the things that managers and salesmen do to themselves to sabotage their own success.
And humans,
And and and
all
and
humans.
yes, and so, I was in a retail business for 17 years,
Mm.
um,
In
along
dealership,
in
and you worked in sales, and then you went into
sales,
management, right?
used car manager up in Cleveland, came back down here, was a general manager in a pretty good sized Ford store at the time, um, managed some other stores, but I'm probably pretty typical of guys from that era. Nobody stayed anywhere for very long.
Mm.
We bounced around a lot. Um, and one day, a guy named Sam Jones came into our Ford dealership with some new, innovative training, which, as the more I listened to it, the more I thought, this isn't new. This is what you're supposed to do.
Mm.
And Sam and I hit it off. And 2 years later, I went to work at Africar with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Tell us about that half a car story and why you thought it was so the way it's supposed to be.
everything was based on integrity. and honesty. And from what I had seen in our business, it's not quite what I was being taught in retail. Um, uh, but I'm going to skip ahead a little bit
Please.
till my grandson Jake had become addicted to heroin and asked me to attend. His mother asked me to attend some meetings with him.
Mm-hmm.
They were all, it was an all men's meeting. She couldn't go. She was afraid to put him in one door and he'd go out the back. So I go in. So I go to these meetings with him for about 2 months. Anywhere from 55 to 90 people, men in the meeting every Tuesday night. And I'm listening and I'm listening. And it takes me about 2 months. And I picked up the phone and I called our old boss, J.E. Wolfington. And I said, man, was our company founded on the principles of AA? And he said, most of it.
Oh
Yep.
my goodness.
How do you know? And I said, I told him the story. He said, I'm so sorry to hear. But he said, yeah, we period right out of the first sentence of the big book. I mean, so anyways, not knowing where that was coming from, I thought, man, this guy, well, he is a genius.
Yeah.
He's 90 years old. He has more energy than I ever thought about having. And
So let's land this a minute because this is so good. So Frank goes to work at Half a Car. I ended up coming a few years later. I'm young and dumb and which is that's how I rolled in my young and mid-young years. But I met this guy who was just an incredible leader, incredible teacher, incredible trainer, and incredible influencer in this. And Half a Car was at that time the largest automobile sales training company in the world, founded by Eustace Wolfington. And you've heard Frank just talk about how he used the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous as being principles of how his company was run. And for Frank to see that and say, oh, wait a minute. Now, as somebody who's lived this, of course, and is writing about this myself, my book is the 12 steps of recovery brought into a leadership lesson. But the first step is we admit it. The second step is we came to believe. The third step was we made a decision. And those are all personal development leadership steps. But what you're saying is Eustace took all those steps and used the principles of that program to run a company. I'm going to explain we period a little bit. Instead, we would never, when we were with Half a Car, say I. We would say we. And it was always we because we couldn't do it by ourselves. It was our accountability partners. It was our brothers on the front lines. It was our supportive team behind us that really made this thing work. So thank you for allowing me to explain that. And also, I just wanted to say, you heard something. I wanted to talk about Frank's past life with Half a Car, he had a huge influence on me. Absolutely. He was a mentor. I told you that, a big brother, incredible trainer. But I think it's time that we all know that he changed lives in the automobile industry, but something happened and he brought up Jake, and he also brought up his passion for his second life. And Frank really redefined at an age when most people retire, refocused on his most important role in his life. So I'm going to let you run with that because I know that's so important to you and to the people listening.
Well, 6 years ago in March, we lost our oldest grandson. He just turned 22 to a heroin overdose. And as I stated earlier, about 18 months before that, he was maybe 2 years before that, I started attending meetings with him and listening to things. And this meeting that I attended with him only took into account step 1, 2, and 3. Week 1, it was step 1. Week 2, it was step 2. Week 3, it was step 3. Week 4, it was back to step 1.
I love that.
And because that foundation is so critical to success. And 3 years later, I look back and think, man, why weren't we training salespeople the same way?
Yeah.
You get nowhere without step 1 and 2. So, and anyways, so I'm in this meeting for about 2 years with Jake, and I'm the only non-alcoholic addict in there. He passes away, and I found out quickly how many new brothers I had. Sorry.
No, don't, you know what? I'm gonna give you a breath here.
Thanks.
So thank you. There's something that's why I wanted you guys to hear this. There's this incredible love. There's an incredible obedience. There's an obedience to who Frank is obedient to the message of our higher power, which we know is Jesus Christ. There's an obedience to the calling. If we had asked Coach 10 years ago or 10 years before this what he'd be doing, he'd probably say he'd be playing golf in West Palm and not necessarily put all of his passion, energy, commitment, purpose into this cause. But again, when a man's convicted and a woman and has this calling that's bigger than any of us, and we obey that calling, there is a supernatural force behind it. So thank you for obeying that calling. And there's hundreds of people that have gone to the Toolbox AA meeting and met Frank and said, I want to be like him. I know it. I just know it. And yet you heard what he said. Because of love, he showed up at his grandson's AA meeting. Never heard anything like that in my life. It wasn't that he was on his deathbed at that time. He did this 2 years before, but he knew he wanted to support him. And he did. And get this, I'm going to say it and then you can run with it. After he died, went to heaven, Frank went to every one of his AA meetings. And that's the story that I want him to carry on and tell you about here.
He'll be gone 6 years in March, as I said. And these guys have continued to allow me to attend this meeting. Not allow. They insist that I come. I don't know of any other non-addict alcoholic who has been, I know of none who've been asked to bring the topic at a meeting. And usually when it comes to the 12 tools in the toolbox, one of them is service to others. And when that one comes around, someone will ask me, can you bring the topic? So it's simple. It's we never used the word easy ever at Africar. It was simple. Things were simple, or they were hard, or they were more difficult, or they were more challenging. But I have friends that ask me, my buddies at the VFW, how can you go and listen to all that misery every Tuesday night? I said, you have no idea. You guys want what those guys have. And I'm not talking about sobriety. I'm talking about being comfortable with yourself, being happy with yourself, knowing that taking one of those tools, change your playmate, your playground, and your playthings. That was a hard one for Jake. He always said to me, well, did you ever think that maybe I could be a good influence on him? I said, yes, I do. But is the time right for that? And I just wish I would have known more back then. Is that a regret? I said I have a few. Mm-hmm. Okay, so but I the things we're doing with Jake's Reach are, if you get a chance, go to a website, jakesreach.org, and look at some of the things we do, because we don't go outside of our, listen, I can't save the world, and I'm not trying to. But if I can keep one person, if one person sees the daylight tomorrow and says, hey, there's a little hope there.
Yeah. Let me read from the mission statement on Jake's Reach. So if you get an opportunity, go there. You'll see this beautiful young man with the Cleveland Cavaliers NBA trophy. And here's what the mission statement is of Jake's Reach, all based, excuse me, on the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the courage to change the things I can. I think all of us needs to hear that. In a minute, I'm going to have Frank talk about those 12 tools, but let's keep going. We bring courage to those who are afflicted with this dreaded, deadly disease, to educate others so that the truth about opiate addiction is brought to light. 80% of heroin users today started with prescription painkillers. Communicate that this disease will no longer thrive in darkness. Healing begins with just one talk. Our goal is one day at a time, one person at a time, and one act of kindness at a time. That is Jake's Reach, signed Frank Marr, founder and Jake's grandfather. Take us back. That's so beautiful. And thank you for putting that on there. But take us back to the toolbox and kind of give us a Reader's Digest step by step. And if somebody wants more information on the toolbox, but they live in North Dakota, how would they get that?
That toolbox meeting came out of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Mm.
So there is a meeting that the founder of our meeting went to there, and the tools follow the 12 steps. Each week, the meeting started out as it would start at 6:15 on Tuesdays and run until 7 o'clock. And that was the newcomers part of. So actually, one of the tools is 90 meetings in 90 days, and you know that saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was 2 meetings. We'd take a break and have the second part of the meeting, and guys would get credit for 2 meetings. And of course, first thing Jake said was, "Hey, I'm going to this one. This is a 2 for 1. This is like going to Taco Tuesday." What a great sense of humor that kid had. Using these tools, talking about these tools, listening to these guys, there's so much wisdom in that room every Tuesday night. You've been to that meeting.
Yeah, I have.
And there is there's a guy there with 53 years sobriety, and there's a guy with 3 days.
Mm.
And his message to the guy with 3 days is, don't think just because you only have 3 days that you can't help someone else. Someone else going to come into this meeting and it's their first day.
Yep. How cool is that?
Yeah. So, another thing I learned in that meeting, and I hadn't done this in a long time, and I've had both knees replaced, one in 2001, one in 2005. Difficult for me to kneel. I know kneel. Someone said in that meeting, the reason we kneel to say prayers is to subjugate ourselves to our Lord.
Yes. Yeah.
You can do it other ways. And I had made excuses for myself for a long time. Not now, not anymore. But when Jake passed in March, we had over 950 people come through the church to view for the showing. And I looked at Vance, who is my co-pilot with Jake's Reach. I looked at him and I said, I don't know a lot of these kids. I've never seen them before. He said, there's about 150 of these people that are in here that are in recovery with Jake. They were in recovery with Jake. I said, what? I had no idea the epidemic was as big as it was. Not in Akron, Ohio, for crying out loud. Come on, give me a break. So a couple days later, I called him and I said, what can we do? And we started to do something. We started with an outreach program, which was once a month, and we still do it today. On the last Saturday of every month, we have clothing that's been donated. We have a church that's just been incredibly good to us. Firestone Park United Methodist Church gives us the church, the hall, and we feed, and they have their own kitchen. So we feed people hot meals. We get them to go food. We have clothing they can pick out and take with them. But we started with eight neighborhood meetings that summer. The mayor of Akron, Dan Horrigan, is a friend, an old friend, and he was doing some town halls. And I called his office and I got to talk to him. And I said, listen, here's what I want to do. I want to do this on a Saturday. You're doing the town halls on a Wednesday. Can I come to the neighborhood you're going to when you're there? He said, yeah, you come. I'll make you a show. You can tell everybody about your meeting. He said, just like being at the auction, you know? So I said, great. So I would go to those and then we'd have anywhere from 60 to 120 people come to our meetings on Saturday. And it was titled Opiates, a Family Crisis. And we brought in the alcohol, drug, and mental health executive for Summit County. And he brought in his Narcan team. Narcan was brand new. I mean, it was very new back then. This is 6 years ago. And we had a little 12-minute class. We passed out Narcan kits. And Vance said to me, he said, you know, if we can save one life, this whole thing's worth it. Well, the count went up over 30 and we stopped counting. One of the stories is a guy is active in Jake's Reach today, active in recovery, got his life back together. He Narcaned his girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time, and she still got high. Wow. And saved them both. Unfortunately, the girlfriend's in prison, and he has joint custody of the little girl. And he brings her to the golf outing, and he speaks to our guys and tells her, I'm not part of her life without all of this. He said, just not. And so we do these eight neighborhood meetings, and a couple things came out of that. One was I would print off 1,000 flyers about the meeting this Saturday before the meeting that was on either Saturday or Wednesday. And we had kids in recovery pass these out, put them in mailboxes. And every time they'd come back and say, you know, I knocked on a door. He said, about every 3 doors, somebody says, yeah, my niece, my nephew, my best friend, my aunt, my grandma, my mom, my dad, somebody in the neighborhood was suffering from this disease, but nobody was talking about it. Yeah. Our mantra was that education and communication was going to be the antidote. And I still think it is. I still think it is. There's this has morphed into, with us, we now work in close conjunction with the Interval Brotherhood Home, which is just celebrated 50 years. It's a recovery house, a gigantic recovery facility, very big. And they were nice enough to give us an office in their building in their new facility, and um, through them, we made a deal with them. I said, listen, we raised some money. We have some money. What can we do? And one of the counselors told me, he said, well, about 1 out of 4 people that leave here have either had their backs turned on by their families, and rightfully so. I'm not saying it's not, but they've stolen from their family. They won't help them out anymore, and they haven't been working for 4 months, so they don't have any money. How do you get into a sober home? Remember I said earlier, change your playmates, your playgrounds, and your playthings. You can't go back where you were. I hate absolutes, but you can't go back where you were.
Yeah, I'm reminded. I did a lesson yesterday at Celebrate Recovery on hope, and I talked about a party I went to 2 days before I went into rehab. That is not a party I really want to talk about. Yeah. But it was a party that was, it was like lions that were getting steak. And when all these people, when the drugs got brought out, it was so ugly. And I remember, Frank, 38 years later, how ugly it is. It was and is. It's amazing. It popped in my head, but it did for a reason. But one thing I was reminded, I'm reading a book that I've read a couple times called Winning the War in Your Mind by Craig Groeschel. He's a pastor in a Life Church in Oklahoma City. And the first chapter is you have to rewire. We have to get rid of those things that we did before. I never saw that kid again I went to the party with. I never saw any of those people, never went to a bar. I couldn't, because I knew if I did, it would be the start of, and how did I get this time? Because I changed everything. I changed my family. I didn't change my family. I was more engaged with my family, but I changed my friends, and dramatically. So thanks for bringing that up. Craig says it's rewiring and then renew. And that's what you're talking about, that once a week you're seeing people renew. How many people do you think in the 6 years that you've been doing this, which is the greatest victory you've ever had in your life? How long you and Kathy been married?
55 years this year.
That's an incredible marriage.
That's St. Catherine of Akron.
Amen on that. And he's been just an example of what it means to be in a great marriage. And it's had its rocks, and Kathy has been an incredible soul and rock in that marriage. And he's walked me through. I'll have to edit this.
I get it.
And I wouldn't. This is very humbling, but I wouldn't be here if I hadn't heard him walk me through some things in my marriage. But the reason I bring that up, as I try to get it back here, is that we have friends around us that have been our people, that we say, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. Frank's that for me. But there's a lot of people that can say that about this man. So I want to go back to your question. How many lives have been saved because you made this commitment to take this different route that you never thought you would take?
Including mine?
Amen.
There's unfortunately not enough, but there's been a lot. There's a lot of positives. We morphed into, I started to say we morphed into a company that we would front the first month's rent for these guys. And as soon as they got to a sober home, they'd go to work. And I have letters. I have, you know what? I was just going to go put this up in the office, but let me read this to you. One of our people, because of the association at IBH.
What's IBH again?
International Brotherhood Home.
Thank you.
It's a recovery place for There's probably 140 or 50 of them in there at a time. But this girl graduated from there, and one of the guys from Jake's Reach came to me and said, "Hey, listen, this girl Pamela, she's sleeping in her car. She's been out of IBH for 3 days, 3 nights. She's sleeping in her car. So we paid for her first month. Then she went to work and paid for the rest of it. She says August 27th, I was homeless living in my car, 2 weeks out of residential treatment. I can't express how much you've helped me. My gratitude from my family and I, although I am not in contact with them now, I will be, I know. But I went from sleeping in my car to being able to pay for my own housing. Just a young girl that the family gave up on her. She's now 9 months sober, and I think she'll get them back. Those are the people. The ripple effect for the things that we do and the things we say. Used to meet one of Bart and my old bosses and a mentor and a friend, a dear friend. He used to say, the people you meet, the books you read, and the goals that you set and keep will change who you are. Yeah. And all these kids have changed me. Yeah. We keep moving forward. We just posted, if you go to our website, you're going to see a picture of 2 guys. We had a job fair back in November for people in recovery only, because I talked to the people at IBH and they said, if you have an open job fair, our people won't come. They don't think they have a fair chance against somebody that doesn't have anything on their record. And I have to tell you about this job fair, because it started out as, we made some more money this year than we've made in a long time. Maybe we should get a scholarship. And my wife said, I don't think scholarship's a good idea. She said that takes 4 years for anything to come out of it. What about trade schools? And we started looking at trade schools, and then we started to look at apprenticeships. Okay, so we brought in the president of the Carpenters Union, and they cover Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And we brought in the training director for IBEW, which is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And we brought in some of the HR department from the city of Akron. And we had this job fair, and we had 35 people in the room. And Bart, the questions, you've been in meetings, you've heard this before. These 3 people that came to speak never heard this before. By the way, I had my friend Bo Sloan, who is our financial advisor, come and speak to them. This is why you need to listen to this. This is how you grow your future. This is how putting $10 a week away turns into retirement for you. And setting the stage for there is hope. Okay, so first question comes up. Guy says, yeah, this is all good, but his name was Rob. Robbie says, this is all good, but I'm a convicted felon. So the guy from the Carpenters Union raised his hand and said, let me take that. I get up and he said, there's felonies and there's felonies. If you hurt somebody, we got a problem with that. But if you got caught with 4 ounces of heroin on you in the state of Ohio, that's a felony. We understand that you're in recovery. We need people that want to work. So Coach Marr gets up and says, okay, that's no longer an obstacle. Everybody hear that? That's no longer an obstacle. So about 20 minutes later, guy Ed steps up, said, well, I don't have a driver's license and I got to jump through 1,000 hoops to get it back. And I said, okay, so that's what Jake's Reach is here for. We'll help you with that. And then the girl from IVH said, Saturday we're having a seminar being put on by the University of Akron law students. You're going to get they're going to show you how to get your records expunged. They're going to show you how to get your driver's license back. And I said, okay, so there's check mark number 2. Excuse number 2 is gone. And you could feel the hope begin to lift in that room. And the last thing, Rob raised his hand again. He said, yeah, but I got 3 violations in 3 different cities. I'm working 30 hours a week right now. And I'm making $12 an hour and I don't have any money to get my license back. I said, that's why we're here. So we put our money where our mouth was, and the picture you will see on the Jake's Reach Facebook page and on the website is Rob and Ed with us going to Harbor Freight, purchasing their first set of tools, and they were starting this week in the apprentice program for I've been a coach. I've been an athlete. I've won a few things. I've never had a prouder day in my life than that day. The ripple effect from this. Think about Ed and Rob. Now think about their families. Ed's girlfriend was there with him. She was astounded that someone would reach out and do something like this for someone they'd never met, which is going to take me back to coaching. John Wooden, in my opinion, the greatest coach that ever lived, said that until you do something for someone who can never repay you, you cannot live a perfect day. And it's a good goal to strive for. These guys, at the end of that session, now it's taken from November until now to get this done, but that's the beginning. I hope it's the opening of a floodgate that has us spending tons of money for tools. I can't wait to do it again. I'm in the process of planning our spring job fair. And that will be probably in April or May, but we're gonna do it again because now. Okay, so think about Ed and Rob and his family. Now think about all the people that know Ed and Rob that are in recovery, that are going, hey, you know what? They did this. Maybe I can do this. And it's as we do these things, I can hear Jake whispering in my ear. This is what he would have done. This is how he would have lived his life. We just couldn't get past one more outage. But here we are, and we have what we have, and
you know what's interesting is I hear this as mourning is done in different ways. You're never going to stop mourning, but for you, every morning means that, and morning meaning AM, and morning meaning your loss for Jake. For you, Frank, is you're picking up the mat and walking, but you're also teaching others to pick up their mat and walk. And it is, I'm on social media all the time, and I see people saying, look at me, look at what I'm doing, look at my jet, look at, this is the biggest, richest guy you're ever going to meet in Coach Marr. And if you're on watching us live on YouTube, you can see behind him the wings. and of course I'm being silly, but it's really true. He just made a commitment that this is the way he was going to live his life. And he didn't play half out. He played all out the way he's done everything his whole life. And God chose him because he's been an example of that. And frankly, my emotion is I get it. When God tapped me on the shoulder and said, when much is given, much is required, the result has been a ministry. The result has been a book. The result has been coaching. The result has been sponsoring. But I want you, as you're listening to this, to touch your soul and ask yourself, what can I do to help this cause out? And Frank, what I want to talk about as we wrap up here is, how do they get a hold of you? How can they do this in their community? And 3 questions: how do they get a hold of you? How do they do this in their community? And also, how do they find those 12 steps you can find anywhere? You can go online and get the 12 steps. But how do we find the toolbox steps in writing somewhere so they can have those?
I'll post them on jakesreach.org, and I'll post them on the Jake's Reach Facebook page.
Perfect. Please do that. And
Absolutely.
Frank, tell us how they can get a hold of you, my friend.
I can be reached at Coach Marr Consulting at Gmail. I can be reached at 330-255-9376. Both of those are on the website. And we field phone calls all the time. I fielded a phone call this morning from a guy and said, "Hey, I called 211 for the city, and you're listed as one of the people that have clothing, but they said it's only once a month." And I said, "Do you need it right away?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, call Vance. He'll meet you down at the church. We've got lots of clothes. You can pick out what you want, take what you want." He says, "Does it cost anything?" I said, No, it doesn't cost anything." He said, "Is there any food down there?" And I said, "Yeah, we have some food. Yeah, we have a pantry of dry goods and stuff." So if you want to call me. I'll talk to you. I would love to talk to you. I would love to see someone take this. I don't know if it's a model. I guess it is. Put it somewhere else. You don't have to lose someone to do this.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to share something with you that's public and it's first time, so you might cut me off. But I told Mary, I know what I was convicted last week to do, and that is I'm having a meeting on freeconference.com, and it's like an AA meeting, but it's for anybody. If you've got any hurt, habit, and hang up, you come. It's anonymous. It's on a call. So I'm going to post it. We'll probably come together. You and I talked about it a little bit on Thursday mornings at 6 a.m. Pacific time is what I think is going to happen. That's 8 a.m. Eastern. And it's going to be every Thursday morning, I think. We're still working out those details. There'll be a 15-minute testimony, like Frank will come on and give his testimony. And then we're just going to open up to a group of people that can tell us their name's Raul and their real name's Bobby. We don't care. It's a safe place for them to vent, because what we know is the vent is really important. It's like a balloon. If you and I keep filling up the balloon with our hurts, habits, and hangups and struggles, and we don't have a way to let it escape, it's going to explode and we're going to die. But when we let it out, even if it's for short periods of time, it's a start for us to get some freedom. And then at the end of each meeting, we'll tell you where to go for help, whether it's CR, AA, whatever. But we want to call it, and we might have to talk to you about it. But my beautiful bride said, "Why don't you call it Toolbox?" Not knowing that's what yours is called.
I don't think that's a problem.
But that's God. Isn't that God?
It is, yeah.
I talked to her. I talked to you last week. I got this idea a few days later. She, out of the blue, says, "Why don't you call it Toolbox?" Because I was going to call it Car Guys in Recovery or something. And I thought, wow, that's just really a powerful statement.
My takeaway from the Toolbox is that there probably isn't any place else I can go outside of my own home where I can say what I need to say and I won't be judged.
Amen.
And I go back to Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. If you're doing that, you cannot judge someone.
Yeah. Amen.
And so many things that we learned from Peg at Half a Car, from use, from George Katz, from John Colombo. Bart and I have had, God has put some unbelievable people in our path.
Yes, absolutely. And Peg was a former sister, a former nun, and she taught like that. And you didn't you didn't want to be late to a meeting, but
No.
we're coming up against it. We got to do it again, and I'm really serious about that because we want to. We absolutely, maybe even as we get closer. When's your golf outing? What's the date? What's the next outing as we wrap this up?
July 15th, 2023, at Windmill Lakes Country Club in Ravenna, Ohio. And I will tell you this, that last year we sold out 3 months before the event.
Okay. So reach out to the website, jakesreach.com. Reach out to Frank.
Reach.org.
Okay. jakesreach.org. Thank you for letting me correct that. Reach out to that. Reach out to me if you have questions about that. And pray about it, walk to it. Don't hesitate to do and make your mark. Frank never hesitated. He immediately went into this with a passion and intensity he lives all his life. So we're living here for a purpose. Don't throw these people away. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, brother Frank.
Love you,
man. Love you so much.